The impact of our Western meat-eating diet on climate is more than the impact of all transportation combined. This fact has been reported at least since 2006, and it's incredibly important. And although this was covered in both presentations to some extent, I'm asking you both why don't you think most people know about it? So Peter, you want to go first?
Sure. Well, first of all, although most people are beginning to be aware of climate change in general, we have for too often had the media largely ignoring it. If you're looking at the mainstream media, it doesn't cover much of climate change, so it doesn't cover much of the impacts of climate change. And of course, far too often we've had our political leadership, rather than talking about the issue and what we can do about it, has been making it into a political football with a tremendous amount of disinformation about every aspect of the problem. So something as straightforward as really understanding where are the greenhouse gas emissions coming from is unfortunately several steps away from where so many of the American public are right now. And then secondly, I would say is even within the conversation, as I mentioned at the beginning, it all focuses on the energy system and to some extent transportation. And that again makes some sense because the coal-fired power plants are very big and visible. And people don't want to realize perhaps that they have this opportunity in their daily, in their hands every day to make a difference. So sometimes it's a little more tricky to talk about food choices than about light bulbs.
Great, thank you. Nelson?
Yes, I agree, Peter, with all that you said. And the only thing I would add is I think there also are some political forces behind the scenes that have skewed the information that we get. There was a very interesting study, I cited it, published by the World Watch Institute. And for those of you who are interested, it's called Livestock and Climate Change. And it was published in the December 2009. And that was the study that argued that the contribution of animal agriculture is up to about 50% of the human-induced warming effect. The UN FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization, gave a different assessment. At one point, it was 18%, then 14.5%. I know one of the authors of the World Watch publication, and the two fellows who did that are environmental specialists. And he told me that there were a lot of politics that fed into the FAO report. And in fact, there's a very interesting article, if any of you are interested. It's called "The FAO Yields to Meat Industry Pressure on Climate Change," and the author is Robert Goodland. It's July 11th, 2012, in the New York Times. And it's an article that talks about some of these political influences. And he argues in that article that when you take into account the full land area utilized by animal agriculture and the full effects of deforestation and loss of carbon from soils, that it's actually the contribution is far greater than is indicated by the FAO report. So, so just a little sideline, and it actually reminds me of a lot of what I heard from my father growing up over the years when he talked about the science and the information being put out by the USDA. It's a very, very similar dynamic. You know, oftentimes the public gets misinformation because of economic and political influences.